Hi, English 1301 students, it's Dr. Murray. I wanted to make a video in which I discuss the response section of the essay about Mr. Death, which is a summary and response. So, a lot to cover. I'm going to get right to it. Remember that the reader will have just read your summary, which is an objective overview of the film. The response is going to be your opinions, but it's your opinions in response to some questions I ask you, which you can find at the top of page 2 of the assignment sheet for this paper. Remember also that the conclusion of your summary will end by sort of talking about the questions that the film raises or sort of issues it touches on. It would make sense for what you say in that conclusion to match with what you talk about in the response section. So if you don't know that in advance, or didn't know that in advance, once you've written your response, it would make sense to go back and review the conclusion of your summary to make sure it matches with kind of what you're going to talk about. Now, in other words, the questions raised that you mention in the conclusion of the summary or maybe some of the issues you end up talking about in the response section. Now, how long is the response section? It is, on my sheet I say 3 to 4 double-spaced pages. So it could be twice as much as the summary if your summary is, let's say, only 2 pages. It could be a little less than twice as much. But then again, I also said that it's okay if you go over by a little bit. I've had people write a 5 or 6 page response. If it's more than that, you're perhaps, if it's more than 5, you might want to ask the question, am I repeating myself? Does it really need to be this long? So I've read papers that have longer summary or response sections that were good, but if you go on too long, it raises the question, is it because you're rambling? Could what you're saying be said more concisely, etc. But it has to be at least 3 pages, double spaced. So you're going to have an introduction, you're going to have body paragraphs, you're going to have a conclusion in the response section. How many body paragraphs? I can't say exactly. I asked for your summary to be 5 paragraphs, which means you have 3 body paragraphs. In this one, it's going to be more than that. You're going to have more body paragraphs than that. But I can't tell you exactly how many because it depends on what you're arguing and how many paragraphs it takes to support the points you decide to make or the claims you decide to make in your thesis statement. So let's get to the thesis statement. I have these questions at the top of page 2 of the assignment sheet, and your responses to these questions will be the claims, or will bring up the claims that you're going to make in your thesis statement. So put your thesis statement at the end of your introduction in the response section. First question is, what do the criticisms included in the film, particularly from Roth and Van Pelt, reveal about Leuchter's claims about the Holocaust? Even more simply, I perhaps could have said, what do the criticisms Roth and Van Pelt make about Leuchter's claims reveal about Leuchter's argument? The answer to this shouldn't be a big mystery, which is they show that he's wrong. The reason I want you to make a claim in response to that question is because it will set you up to first discuss the specific forensic, scientific arguments that both the historian Van Pelt and the chemist Roth make in regarding Leuchter's claims. And one, it will mean that you'll have a couple of body paragraphs, perhaps a few, but probably at least a couple body paragraphs at the beginning of your response section that will deal with what Van Pelt tells us and what Roth tells us. And I'm particularly, for this part, most interested in the, evidence-based physical arguments they make. With Roth, it's chemistry with Van Pelt, it's what's called forensic history. It's his visit to the archives and what he finds, etc. Okay, then so in response to that question, what do the criticisms that Roth and Van Pelt make reveal about Leuchter's claims about the Holocaust? Your answer to that question will be part 1 of your thesis. My next questions, I'm going to read the next 2. How do you explain Leuchter's participation in Zundel's trial and his involvement in neo-Nazi conferences after the trial? And why is he unwilling to consider that he might be wrong? You could perhaps deal with these 2 questions by answering it with one claim. Essentially what I'm asking there is, if Leuchter's wrong about the Holocaust, why did he make these claims? Is it that he just doesn't realize that he's wrong? Is it that he's, convinced that he's correct? Is it other reasons? Is it that he has something to gain by making these claims? Is something wrong with his mind? It could be various things, and I want you to consider, why does he make these claims? Why is he unwilling to consider whether he might be wrong? You could, in response to those next 2 questions, you could make a claim, and it could have a couple parts to it if you want, but I think you could do it in one sentence. My last question is, what does all of this tell us about Fred Leuchter? I mean, in a way, you could say, what kind of guy is he? But what's going on with him, okay? In a way, this it potentially connects back to some of those other things that we found out about him. He saw the aura or entity, or thought he did, in the photograph of the electric chair, from earlier in the movie. He drinks 40 cups of coffee and smokes 6 packs of cigarettes a day. Or if you don't believe that's true, why would he say it? I guess what I'm saying is those things aren't as important in a way as the claims he makes about the Holocaust. But Errol Morris included them in the movie because I think he suspects that they show us something about Fred Leuchter, about what he's like, about the way he thinks. So to sum up, you've got these 4 questions. I think you could have a thesis that consists of, let's say, 3 claims in response to these 4 questions. They're related claims, and that will make up your thesis for this section. Now, what do you do in your introduction before getting to your thesis? You can't do what you did in the introduction, the summary, giving us all the background, because it would be redundant. You already did that. What I recommend is doing something that will activate the reader's curiosity. One way you could do that would be to focus on either a quote from the film or a scene from the film, or it could be a scene from or a quote from the 60 Minutes piece about Leuchter, or about the film, or about Errol Morris, that gets the reader thinking about sort of the territory that you're about to cover in this paper, and gets them thinking about it in a way where they go, like if you give a quote that makes them go, why would he say that? I mean, one example that comes to mind is you could set up the moment in the film where you say, after not including his voice in the film throughout much of the movie, Errol Morris makes an interesting choice near the end of the film where he decides to include his own voice for the first time. The fact that it's the only time we hear him emphasizes it, and then you let us know that basically Errol Morris asks Fred Leuchter, have you ever considered you might be wrong? And of course Fred's response is, no, I'm past all that. That's a very interesting and very strange and telling moment. But you would, after introducing it or bringing it up, you would also need to explain, get into this, either talk about what questions it raises or talk about what it shows about him in a way that leads into your thesis. That's a possibility. Another one that comes to mind is the quote from Van Pelt, where he talks about Leuchter being a victim of the myth of Sherlock Holmes. I could say more about that, but I won't. I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility. There are actually probably multiple, I don't know exactly how many, but there are probably different things you could put or use from the film that would be interesting. The aura or entity scene, perhaps. It depends how you use it or how you comment on it. So, but if you decide to use a scene like that there, you might be taking away from something you can use as evidence or support in your body paragraph. So you need to choose going, would that work best up there like that to sort of activate the reader's curiosity, or would it work better as support down here? That's up to you. Okay, that's your introduction. I've got to move on. You will have several body paragraphs, so I'll just tell you what you'll do in a body paragraph, and you sort of repeat this, which is claim, which is a topic sentence. And remember, what a topic sentence does is announces the focus of a paragraph, but it also in some way connects to your thesis or part of your thesis. It's going to be a little different than the introduction, where you just have parts 1, 2, and 3 of your thesis, and then you have 3 topic sentences, one for each body paragraph. In this one, it's going to be a little more complicated because you might have more body paragraphs than you have claims in your thesis. But just keep in mind, you make a claim as a topic sentence, which you should have at the beginning of each body paragraph. It should announce the focus of that paragraph, but also in some way connect back to your thesis. So a claim, which is a general statement, followed by specific evidence or support, okay? Describing a scene from the film, giving us a quote, something like that. Once you've done that, then you need to explain the quote. Tell us what this shows, how we should think about it. Keep your reader in mind. Your reader going, okay, well, why are you using that as an example? This scene illustrates that, something like that. Okay. Once you've done some sufficient explaining of your evidence, in some way connect back to your original claim. Not so overtly that you repeat your topic sentence, but in some way make it clear that all of this, helps show that what you were claiming in your topic sentence is true. And you do that in body paragraph after body paragraph, okay? Now, in the conclusion of the response section, you're going to revisit your thesis, okay? I say revisit, not restate, because I don't want a cut and paste job. Same idea, but perhaps you change the wording a little bit, okay? But then the main thing you do in the conclusion of the response section is you reflect on the significance of what you've talked about. We've spent all this time with this film, discussing it, writing discussion board posts about it. You answered my sheet of questions about it. You're writing a paper of 2 different sections about it. So this paragraph you'll write as your conclusion. It's the last thing you'll have to say about this film, for now anyway. And so my question in a way is, what's to be taken from all this? What can we learn from Errol Morris's film? What's the value in looking closely, in watching the film multiple times? What's to be learned, okay? What lessons does the film have to teach would be another way you could say it. And then another would be, does the film have broader applications? Here I'll reference that in the 60 Minutes piece, Roger Ebert speaks of Errol Morris. He says he's like a magician, and he says because a magician directs your attention here while he's doing the trick. I'm, over here, let's say. Okay, it's the idea of he has a flame come out of his hand, and meanwhile he's pulling a card out of his pocket, right? So it's, and you might be like, what's he talking about? I think what he's suggesting is he made a film about Fred Leuchter, but when you really start thinking about it, you realize the film is about a lot more than just this one case. Now, of course, it is about this case, but what can we learn that might apply to other cases? And I've often said about this film, it came out 25 years ago, but I think it's more relevant now than it was when it came out. And I think part of it is that conspiracy theories, misinformation has gone mainstream, and this movie was dealing with it before this time where we live in a culture full of it. Okay, I'm going to have to end it there. I hope that helps. Thanks.